You fired her for protecting an elderly man. What a disgrace. Emma, a kind-hearted waitress, stood her ground when a group of teenage bullies started harassing an elderly biker. Her brave decision cost her the job she had dedicated her life to, but she refused to bow down to injustice. Just 2 hours later, the earth trembled as the deep rumble of 500 motorcycles filled the streets, and in an instant, Emma's world changed forever. This is her story. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tales Unveiled. Let's dive into this incredible true story. Emma Thompson, a devoted 42-year-old waitress, had spent the past 2 decades working at Johnny's Diner, a small-town restaurant with a rich history. Unlike many who sought different career paths over time, Emma remained right where she was, not out of necessity, but because she loved taking care of people. The faces that passed through the diner's doors weren't just customers to her. They were family. Life hadn't been easy for Emma. After losing her husband 12 years ago, she had single-handedly raised her daughter, Sarah, while juggling long shifts at the diner. Many had told her she could find a job with better pay, but Emma knew money wasn't everything. Johnny's Diner had been there for her in her darkest times, offering her stability when she needed it the most. Her loyalty to the place never wavered. It was more than just a job. It was her second home. Johnny's Diner wasn't just another restaurant in town. It was a pillar of the community. The classic red and chrome building had stood proudly on the corner of Main Street for over 50 years. More than half the town had memories rooted in its booths and bar stools. Emma had started working there when the original owner, old Mr. Johnny, was still around. He had treated her like a daughter, even helping her pick up extra shifts whenever she struggled to cover Sarah's tuition. Over the years, Emma had become the heart of the diner, remembering every regular's order, their stories, their lives. For 15 years, Mr. Peterson had started his mornings there, always arriving at 6 a.m. sharp, always taking his coffee with 2 sugars and his toast extra crispy. Mrs. Johnson, a retired schoolteacher who once taught Emma's daughter, never had to remind Emma about her nut allergy. Emma just knew. She had spent 2 decades pouring her heart into this place, and it showed in the way she treated everyone who walked through those doors. But 3 months ago, everything changed. When Mr. Johnny retired, he passed the diner down to his son, Richard, a businessman who saw profits where his father had once seen people. Within days, Richard made his intentions clear. Prices were raised, the menu was altered, and an upscale ambience was forced into a place that had always been homey. The regulars who had once found comfort in the warmth of Johnny's Diner suddenly felt out of place. Emma watched helplessly as the soul of the restaurant she loved began to fade. Then came the rainy afternoon in October that changed everything. Emma was in the middle of her shift when the familiar roar of an old Harley-Davidson caught her ear. It was Frank Morrison, a 75-year-old biker who had been coming to Johnny's Diner every Tuesday for coffee and apple pie for longer than Emma had worked there. His weathered leather jacket and graying beard carried the marks of a life well lived, and his kind words had made many people's days a little brighter over the years. Frank wasn't just a customer. He was part of the diner's history. Hanging on the wall behind his usual booth was a faded black-and-white photograph from 1968, showing a young, proud Frank standing beside his motorcycle alongside old Mr. Johnny himself. As Frank walked towards his booth, a group of teenage boys from the nearby private school began mocking him. These weren't just any customers. They were the wealthy, entitled crowd that Richard had been trying to attract. "Look at that old man," one of them sneered. "Still thinks he's some kind of tough biker. He should have left the motorcycle at the retirement home." Another laughed cruelly. "I bet he can't even remember where he parked it," a third one added, sending the whole table into fits of laughter. Emma's jaw clenched as she saw Frank's shoulders slump ever so slightly. He heard them. Everyone heard them. But Frank, ever the dignified man, said nothing and kept walking. He had faced far worse in his life than a few snot-nosed kids. But Emma could see the pain in his eyes. And that's when she snapped. Enough was enough. With fire in her voice, She turned toward them. That's it. Pack up your things and leave. We don't serve bullies here. The teenagers gawked at her, shocked. Nobody had ever stood up to them before. One of them scoffed, pulling out his phone. Do you even know who my father is? He's on the city council. Emma didn't flinch. I don't care if your father is the president. You don't treat people like that in here. Not in Johnny's diner. Not ever. The commotion drew Richard out from his office. When the teens told him what had happened, his face darkened with fury. Emma, you can't throw out paying customers, he snapped. Apologize. Now. But Emma stood firm, her voice unwavering. No, sir. They tried to trip an elderly man. That's dangerous and cruel. Richard's eyes turned cold. Then you're fired. Get your things and get out. Frank tried to intervene, but Richard wouldn't listen. With quiet dignity, Emma untied her apron, gave Frank a reassuring smile, and walked out with her head held high. What Richard didn't know was that Frank Morrison wasn't just any old biker. Back in the 1960s, Frank had founded the Iron Veterans Motorcycle Club, one of the most respected motorcycle clubs in the state. Over the years, they had raised millions for charity, helped countless people in need, and unbeknownst to Emma, they had even helped cover her husband's medical bills all those years ago. Minutes after Emma left, Frank pulled out his phone. Within moments, the story of what had happened spread through every motorcycle club in the area. Customers inside the diner were already texting, calling, sharing what Richard had done. And 2 hours later, the ground rumbled. The streets filled with the thunder of over 500 motorcycles. The Iron Veterans, the Hellhounds, the Steel Guardians, every club in the state, leather jackets, steel boots, eyes full of fire. Frank led them into the diner, his voice booming across the silent room. This diner used to stand for something, he declared. Johnny understood that. It wasn't about money. It was about respect. Then, a tall woman in her 50s stepped forward. We've already spoken to your father, she told Richard. He's selling us the diner. And our first act as new owners? Emma's the new manager. Today, Johnny's diner still stands. Emma runs it with the same warmth as always. And Frank, he still sits at his booth every Tuesday with a slice of apple pie. And those teenagers, they came back. Not to mock, but to apologize. Turns out, 500 bikers can teach a very powerful lesson about respect.